So Joe Rogan had a very busy week. This week's podcast is basically the Rogan retrospective, right? Just commentary on the guests of Joe Rogan. Obviously, the most influential podcast in the world. And he had on Mark Zuckerberg. And I think we just have to ask, what the Zuck is going on? From way downtown. Do you get it? Because his last name's Zuckerberg. What? The Zuck is going on. Mark Zuckerberg has just been understood to be kind of this liberal progressive prince, especially through COVID and through all of the tensions of 2020 and after Trump's, first election victory, and then, into the Biden versus Trump #1 fight. Allegedly, Zuckerberg put in millions and millions of dollars, not really directly, but kind of indirectly in the hopes to try to keep Trump out of the White House. There was so much censorship going on Meta's different platforms, especially Facebook is very obvious. And this huge uproar. Facebook made the decision to really downgrade all political content, which seems fair until you realize that the highest producing political content on Facebook was all on the right. And so, if the curve from left to right goes like this and you suppress everything, you are not equally suppressing both sides. And people felt this, and there's been a lot of frustration, and he's been kind of seen as a bad guy. And social media has its own kind of tangled webs of like how terrible it is for children and child trafficking that happens and the selling of drugs and everything else. So people have started to notice in the last year or so, Zuckerberg 2.0, right? And he doesn't just kind of look like an alien all the time. He's starting to dress like very relevantly. He looks cool, He's got the perm, right? My son and all of his friends, they all perm their hair, right? That's the thing. Now, Mark Zuckerberg's 40. He's not 16, but that's fine. I'm looking at 40, It's there. It's not there yet, but I can see it. I'm not over the hill, but I can see the hill, and I still try to stay somewhat fashionable. So I'm not mad at him. It's just very different from how he has looked and felt and presented himself for like ever. Right. And then it was like on 4th of July, I think he's like drinking a Coors Light and carrying an American flag and doing his like watercraft thing. And then he says that Trump, the way he responded was really cool after he got shot. And everyone's just like, okay, what's going on? And I think we finally got the first part of our answer. The problem is nobody knows how to feel about this answer because no one's sure if they can trust that the change is real. But let's first look at an announcement that he put out on Meta's website. So,
hey, everyone. I want to talk about something important today because it's time.
Let me slow that down just a little bit.
Time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
All right, so he goes on to outline basically a 5-point plan to get rid of the content moderators, right? Because they kind of ended up being left-leaning naturally over time, instead to do more like community notes, like happens on X. It's so hard for me to call it X. Just call it Twitter. It happens on Twitter, community notes. They are going to move all of their remaining content moderation, keeping an eye on things like child exploitation and the sale of drugs and terrorism, that they're moving it. He says from California to Texas. The greatest state. And that's shocking. And he says just so people, it's coming out of California, basically because everyone knows California is so politically biased that no one can trust if it's based there. So we're going to put it in Texas. All of this is wild. And what people are trying to suss out is like, okay, is this real? Is this a real change of heart? Has he always been a free speech guy? It is true. 5 years ago, he gave a commencement speech and he really pushed like, we have to have free speech. We have to protect it at all costs. But then the government started applying some pressure, and all of a sudden he went through his leadership, throughout his companies, into really strict restriction, really strong moderation. And it was obviously politically biased against those on the right, while things on the left kind of just were left alone unless it was really heinous or really extreme. So this got even more interesting because right after putting out this announcement on the Meta platform, he then went on, of course, Joe Rogan.
Wow.
And on Rogan, they continued this conversation. And not only is he going, look, we got to make some changes, but he starts to absolutely throw the Biden administration all of the way under the bus. Let's take a look.
This really hit the most extreme, I'd say, during the Biden administration when they were trying to roll out the vaccine program. And I'm generally like pretty pro rolling out vaccines. I think on balance, the vaccines are more positive than negative. But I think that while they're trying to push that program, they also tried to censor anyone who was basically arguing against it. And they pushed us super hard to take down things that were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down.
Wow.
And I was just like, well, we're not going to do that. Like, we're clearly not going to do that. I mean, that is kind of inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down things that
it was
talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration.
Wow. Shots fired. He goes on to say that members of the Biden administration would call and they would be screaming at Meta employees, cussing at Meta employees. And he even implied they would threaten legal action, and that when they tried to not comply with certain things, that all of a sudden they would be under investigation for something or having to dig through all of this red tape just to run their businesses. This is a very damning indictment against the overreach of government during the Biden administration. Wherever you fall politically, this should make you really uncomfortable that our private platforms, Meta, Twitter, we saw in the Twitter files, there was a lot of pressure from the three-letter agencies. There was pressure from the administration. Are we okay with this? And what's happening to Mark Zuckerberg? I think people kind of fall on one of two. There's like the super optimists, and typically I fall headfirst into that category of like, oh, dude, obviously he's changed because I just believe everything everyone ever says. That's like the wisest way to live, but if you're built really optimistically, then you're just like, yeah, free speech. And then there's like the super pessimists who are like on conspiracy level 10 about what Mark Zuck is up to right now. And I don't know. And the answer is none of us know exactly what Mark Zuck is up to right now. We don't know what the Zuck is going. Is that bad? Should I not be saying that? Okay. Here's what I think. I think we don't know. I do think there's some hints. And one of the things he said in his actual announcement, it's one of the last things he said, is he's like, this is hard. And when you build complex systems are complex. That's basically the beginning of his whole thing. Is like, to moderate all this, we have to have complex systems, and complex systems are complex systems, right? So just this kind of like circular argument, but it is true. And I'm sure it's hard to get it all right. And he explains that in some level of very boring detail on Joe Rogan's podcast. You can check it out for yourself. But he says something in there that I think kind of shows his hand a little bit. He goes, we've done a lot of soul searching and we've really thought through this and we've really looked back at our data. And with a new incoming administration, we think now is a great time to go back to being more of a free speech platform, which should almost inherently cause you to ask the question, If Trump had not won, would Mark Zuck be making these changes? If Trump had not won, would everyone's opinion of him still be?
He's a nasty person.
That's not nice, Trump. So we don't know. The answer is we don't know. And so how should we think through this? And how should we move about in these spaces? Well, I think this is probably more advice for me than for you, but it might be helpful for those who tend to be more optimistic. We have to be careful when we see people who make changes that we appreciate when there is inherently conflicts of interest that could be pushing them in that direction. It doesn't mean that we fall all the way into cynicism. And so to these cynics out there, when you see something that moves towards your preferred direction, it is okay to be happy with it, even if you think that it is just him looking out for himself, or you have the worst motives ascribed to him, or you think it's some global conspiracy of why all of this is changing, right? There is power in finding some kind of middle ground of going, you know what? I'm not just going to push all my chips into the table and go all in on Mark Zuckerberg because I just don't know. And what you need in these situations is you need time. And so, especially for people on the right, you've seen a lot of newcomers. You've seen Elon kind of like fully embrace the right. You've seen Tulsi Gabbard now call herself a Republican. You've seen RFK come over to the right. And so if you're on the right, celebrate, but what you need is time. And I'm going to kind of make an analogy that's going to seem really unrelated, but I think that there is some crossover in the statistical data here. So there is a statistic that says if you will date someone for a minimum of 2 years before you marry them, your odds of divorce go down over 30%. If you date someone for at least 3 years before marrying them, then your odds of divorce go down even more significant than that. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It could be like somewhere near 60%. And so why? Why does that time matter? Well, time proves out character and consistency. And that's what you need to see. Is Mark Zuck 2.0 with his gold chain and his perm, is he the real deal? Is he now a libertarian? Is he a MAGA bro? What is he? Is he still super far left on basically every issue, but thinks that free speech is just the best thing for his platform during this administration? Is he trying to avoid investigation from the new administration? Like, what's going on here? I don't know, but I think we will see it if we give it time. What's going on with Elon, Tulsi, RFK? You don't really know because we just don't know people's intentions, but give it some time. There is wisdom sometimes in just watching and giving some space. And while you give that space, give the benefit of the doubt. It's easier to live that way. You will sleep better. You will have to take less Tums. You will have less heartburn. Just try to assume the best about the situation. And I think the scripture that really resonates is that we are to be wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. And so when someone comes your way on an issue, you want to be gentle. You don't want to just start smacking them with hammers. You don't want to just start going, you're not real, and I don't believe you, and you used to be on the other side. It's like, that's a great way to end up isolated and alone and on an island. Be gentle as doves, but be wise as serpents. Like, you had a huge hand in censoring the free speech of the American people for like a long time now. And so, man, I'm so happy and I am so excited to see how this gets implemented, right? I'm going to watch it over time. I'm going to see your character and consistency. We're going to see what happens the next time someone on the other side of the aisle comes into the Oval Office, because that will happen. The pendulum will swing again. And will all of the people who have navigated towards Trump, will they swing back in the other direction? Or is this about actual conviction? You don't know, and I don't know. And so we should be patient. We should be gentle and welcoming if it's your idea that they're moving towards, but you should also be patient. You should be wise as a serpent and you should be gentle as a dove. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed so you can stay up to date with all new content. And if you want early access, exclusive content, and monthly live Q&As, make sure to check out patreon.com/ClaytonTime.